All right, our recording is started on the GibbsCAM and Coffee for today. So again, like I said, we're going to go through a bunch of solid model related topics, how to modify and make them usable for you as the programmer. So let's turn this on over to Bill Reed and get this show on the road for everybody.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Reed. I'm one of the support guys over here at Virtual Manufacturing, and we're going to talk about a few different topics here today. Ideally, to help you manipulate solids, control visibility, maybe some tips and tricks. There may be some things that you already know, obviously, because I'm sure most GibbsCAM user relatively advanced with the software, but hopefully you'll pick up a couple things that may help you on your journey forward. So right now I'm starting out with a basic 3-axis mill MDD here, machine definition, and I've got a part that's pretty skewed. It's a standard mill bracket demo part that I'm using, and it came in as it is sometimes if you're using models from your engineering department or from a customer. Oftentimes they do not end up in your GibbsCAM VNC in the orientation in which you want it. So this is a basic 3-axis mill part that we're going to align. So one of the first things I'm going to do is figure out how I want to orient this part. So if I were to make this part in, say, a 6-inch vise, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on face selection. And face selection allows me to select certain faces on the model to manipulate them. I can hold down Control and I can multi-select more than one face, click off in space and deselect. So for this particular one, I know that I want this face facing upward. So I'm going to select that face, right-click, and align that face to the coordinate system. So that face is right there on my XY active coordinate system. It's still a little crooked. So right now we're just talking about orientation. And once we get our orientation, then we can talk about placement in relationship to our work fixture offset. So right now there's a few different ways. I can continue using face selection and orient the face, but I want to talk about a couple tools that aren't often used. And these tools are absolute translate and absolute rotate. And the difference between standard rotate and standard translate is that absolute translate is kind of an incremental translate. I want to move it from a distance from wherever it is or an angle from wherever it is. When you put absolute in the front of that, it's telling it I want to move it from an angle to an angle or from a position to a position. So there's a subtle difference there that, but is pretty powerful. So I know that this is skewed at a certain angle. So if I wanted to just do a standard translate, I would have to pull geometry, measure, figure out what the angle is, do the math, and figure out the incremental amount to get this squared to where I want it to go. But in using absolute rotate, I can do it a little bit more simply. So I'm going to turn on edge selection. I'm going to pull this edge here. And so I have that line. So I can go up here to modify absolute rotate. And I'm going to double click in here and click Alt and select that line. So it gives me that angle. And then I can tell it exactly where I want to move it to. I can tell it I want to move it to 0 degrees. Well, select my model, move it to 0 degrees. If I wanted to put this at 90 degrees, I could do that as well and skew it square that way. So it's going from whatever angle this line is. Whoops, back out here. To wherever I want it to go. And in this particular instance, I want to rotate it to 180 degrees to get it into the orientation that I would like. I'm going to get rid of that geometry that I just created. So from here, I'm going to do Control tilde, and the tilde is the little wavy line underneath the escape key, which is the hotkey for shrink wrap. Otherwise, you can go to modify and shrink wrap here. Control tilde would do the exact same thing. So this is shrunk wrap, our stock designation, which is in our document control, to the extents of the solid model that's on the screen. Now, that's all well and good, but that's not where I want my work fixture offset. It's not even in the center of the hole. It's not in the upper left corner of the part. So this is where I'm going to use absolute translate. Now, I don't know where the corner of this part is. Now, technically I do. If I go into document control, I know it's these numbers here, but without having to copy and paste those numbers and move those numbers, I'm going to move my part so that the upper left corner is on my work fixture offset Z, XYZ 0. So again, I'm going to go to modify and absolute translate. So for this instance, it's asking where do I want to move it from and where do I want to move it to. So we're going to use a feature called geometry interrogation or solid model interrogation. So if I double click on any one of these, it's looking for an X position. So if I hold down the Alt key, it turns my cursor into a square, and I can click on that face, and it tells me where in space that surface is in X in relationship to my XYZ0. I can double click in Y, rotate my part, and click in Y, because this is the actual area. This is the location in which I want to move my part for my origin to be in the upper left corner. Z, if I do that in Z, it doesn't change because right now my part is located with this top face at Z0. So then do its grayed out. It doesn't have enough information to do anything. I need to select my model. Now, the to position, obviously, I want to move it from here to X0, from Y to Y0, and Z isn't going to change. So if I click do it, my origin is now in the upper left corner of my part. Now I can go back here to modify and shrink wrap again. So my stock is now shrunk around the extents of my solid model. And going into document control, I can see the actual measurements of my solid part and as well as the thickness. Now, once I have this oriented correctly and now positioned correctly, I can start working on my stock if I wanted to mill this out of a piece of billet. So I'm going to go into my document control. And let's say they cut this stock on my router or my traveler a 1/4 inch oversize. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to add 0.125. Now remember, anywhere in GibbsCAM where there's a numerical input, you can use that as a calculator. So my X min, I'm going to go minus 0.125. My Y max, I'm going to go plus 0.125, minus 0.125. And you see my stock is expanded to give me an 1/8 inch around the actual size of the part. My Z max, I'm going to tell it I'm going to face off 0.50 thou above my part. So it gives me my facing stock, and say they gave me minus 1.3 inch piece of stock. I can just add the 0.05, hit equal, and now I have it reflecting an 1.75 inch piece of stock with a 1/4 inch of stock all the way around that I can profile for this. Now, once I have my stock set up, let's go ahead and import a vise. So I have a macro here, which will load a vise. Now, if you don't have this macro, just send us an email. We can send it out to you with the instructions on how to install. Now, why do I care about having a vise within my VNC? Well, for a few reasons. You can use that vise for collision avoidance. You can use that vise if you're taking screen caps or if you're using the reporter setup within GibbsCAM to create setup sheets. So a vise does give you a bit more of a visual representation of how the part's going to be set up. And if you're using this software to create images for your setup sheets, it really does help the operator get a better sense of how this part's going to be set up. So I'm going to go up here to macros, and I'm going to simply click load vise macro, and it gives you a couple options here. You want to put the parallel height in there, or grip distance. If you want the stock in the center, sticking out of the left hand, right side of the vise, and I'll just simply click OK. And so there I have my vise set up, and I'm ready to start applying toolpath. Now, for this particular one, I'm going to talk about surfacing and how you can modify models to help toolpath. Now, I often get people that send me pack and goes where they've simply selected an entire model, click do it, and they've gotten a bird's nest of toolpath in here. Now, GibbsCAM is trying to do its best to understand what kind of toolpath you want and give it to you in the best way possible. But sometimes if you give it a little bit more help, you can massage the toolpath and get a better result for yourself. So in this particular case, I'm going to take this toolpath, double click it, and it's going to end up in the body bag. Now, I always do this when I'm going to modify a model because it really does. I don't like modifying the finished model, the customer supplied model. I like keeping that original. So I'm going to put this in the body bag, and I'm simply going to hit Control D. Control D will create a duplicate and put it into the workspace. So once that appears, I'm going to go into the body bag and name this something like original. So I know not to modify that model. So in this particular case, I have a process already, and I'm going to select this angle because I want to use a ball end mill to machine this angle because it's a weird angle. And if I click do it, you can see my toolpath. Now it's jumping over these empty spots. It's diving down in this hole, ideally not a toolpath that I would really want to run. So one of the tools that I like to use, one of the things I like to do is modify my toolpath. So if I wanted to clean that up, I could go in here to this fourth tool on my advanced solid modeling palette. So typically it'll come open like this. I like to click this first and second icons to open up my advanced modules here. So I want to make sure I have face selection on, and I'm going to hold control and click all of these features for this cutout here. You have to hold control if you want to deselect, or you can do a shift drag and select that way. Anything that intersects that selection window is going to be selected. And then I'm going to go to this fourth icon. I'm going to keep only these middle three selected and not create plug, and click do it. And there it is, healed that cutout from my model. If I have a couple of holes that are breaking into that feature that I want to machine, I'll select the inner cylinder. If it has a bottom, you would want to select that as well, and click do it. And now I've healed all the features from there. So if I go back to my toolpath, reselect my face, redo, now I have a nice toolpath that goes across there. Nice and easy, not interrupted by any of those additional features, but I have not changed my original part model. Now, if I run a simulation on this, oops. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another feature. So if I ran a simulation, it's going to simulate an entire complete block, which is not necessarily that helpful. So I'm actually going to put this one in the body bag too and create another duplicate of that. Then I'll take this model, I'll select that facet face, and I'll unstitch that. Now I can right click and tell it that this is a stock model. So when I do run this toolpath, I can visually see how that tool interacts with the stock. So if I single step through there, I can see that my first pass is pretty heavy, because when it does create the toolpath, it's going to go from the tangent point of the ball, or the tip of that ball end mill. So my first pass is very aggressive and give me some premature wear, and depending on the material, maybe chip out my part. So I can do another thing on this model where I can select this face, and I'm going to offset that stock, or sorry, that solid model about 1/8 of an inch. And if you watch it, using the offset tool will actually grow your solid model and make it mathematically correct. So I can shrink holes, I can offset faces. So in this particular instance, I'm going to offset this face 1/8 of an inch. Boom, additional stock. So I'm going to go back up to my toolpath. Because I've changed the model that is associated with that toolpath, I get this error. It just simply means I've moved it or changed the solid body that was associated with that toolpath. Not a problem. Just click OK, reselect that face, and redo. There we go. Now, if I watch that sim and single step through, I can see my first pass is taking a nice, easy cut into my solid model. So that's a quick way that you can use model alignment, model orientation, model placement, and you can modify your model to help work for you and massage it to get you better toolpath. All right. I didn't look into the chat to see if I have any questions related to that. Looks like we're clear. I've done an excellent job in explaining it, or you guys are experts. So let's go to the second one. Second one's going to be pretty straightforward. So I've got a part that's brought into a mill turn machine. It's a busy part, and a lot of times when you're getting models from a customer, your engineering department, or even if you're importing models from, say, tooling models or fixture models from Bigmaster Car, sometimes that format is a step file. There's a few other formats that are affected by this. And so it comes in what I call unclean, and unclean models are not showstoppers, but they will increase the amount of work that you have to do down the line. So one of the first things I'll do is, say I wanted to machine this top, let me turn on face selection, this top face. So I can select that face, right click, and extract the edges. Now, one of the things you'll notice, to make it easier to see, you can either put this model into the body bag, or there's a tool right here, which is show solids. So in clicking that, all it does is turn off the visibility of any solid models on your screen without putting it into the body bag. So this is a really quick way if you wanted to get a look at geometry or select geometry without having the model interfere. Now you see those countersink, the tops of the countersinks came in as 2 half holes with connectors, as well as this large bore, where those are actual circles, and they should have come in clean yellow circles. So what that tells me is that my model does have breaks in it in the translation from when it was imported from its native geometry. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to shift drag, select everything, and delete those, turn my model back on. And if I turn on edge selection, Edge selection will show you all of the intersections between all the facets or faces of your model. And I can see that my countersink and my ID and my drill tip all have breaks in it, as well as my large diameter bore countersinks there, and including the small radii. Now, another way you can see these without using face selection is controlling the visibility of the model itself. So I have render solid faces. I have this, which will highlight all the vertices. Sometimes I want to use this mode. And lesser used modes are this one here, which kind of shows you a wireframe, and this one will show you transparent faces. So all of these methods will show you those breaks that are in some of our cylinders. So the easiest way to go about this is to simply select our model and go up here to solids. And there's a couple tools called remove unneeded topology and simplify. Now, what that does is it messes with the math in the background. Now, in selecting these tools, it will smooth out facets and try to close up any voids and bad intersections within your model, but it will not change it geometrically. So you don't need to worry about it changing hole sizes or feature sizes. It just tries to clean up the topology or the surface textures of your model. So actually, before I do that, I'm going to turn on edge selection and zoom in so you can actually see it. So if I select that, you can kind of see those breaks. If I go up here to solid and hit remove unneeded topology, boom, they're all gone, including the breaks that are in the center of these larger bores. And I always run simplify as well. I run both of these tools to get the model in as good a condition as possible before I move forward. So I'm going to click simplify also. And now if I turn on face selection, select this top right click, extract the edges, and turn off my model, boom, I have nice clean circles. Now that's kind of key on holes, especially because you can't drill a hole from an arc. You can drill it from a circle or a point, but not an arc. So without having to recreate those, this is one way to clean up your model, give you better functionality. If you were to interpolate those as bores, you would actually get two G2 or two G3 moves. So it's going to reduce the amount of code as well. So that's one way to save yourself a little bit of work further down the road. When you import a model, use these tools in solids, remove unneeded topology, and simplify. All right. So I think that's it for me. So we'll switch it over to Dave, and he'll talk about some other things that ideally will make you more efficient out there in the field. Dave, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. All right, Dave McCray here, Virtual Manufacturing. I also do tech support along with Bill. And I'm going to be discussing the body bag and model properties. So we're going to start off with model properties. And there's, most of you guys probably already know this, but there's basically three types of models within GibbsCAM. I can call a model part stock, which is, in this case, it's already had some turning done on it. But this is the condition of my stock before I start machining it when I go to the 4th axis mill. This is my finished part model, and this would be any fixtures as well. So all of these models have what we call properties. If I right click and go show properties, this is where it's going to bring up the properties of the model, where we can set it as part, fixture, stock, fixture display only, or stock display only. We can also name the model right here. So I would call this, finished part. Call this Chuck, which, as you see, this is a fixture, and call this stock condition. So I'm just keeping that window and I can click between them. One of the real important things, especially if you're sending things to us for support or help, is don't have your chord height set to 1/10,000th. Here it's at 1,000, which is reasonable. But if I go 0.0001 with all my models, my file size is going to grow like crazy, which will make it larger to try and email to us. But also here, if we go to the other extreme, 0.1, and click apply on this particular model, I'm sure you've all seen where your model comes in. It's like, hey, there's squares. You could still pull the geometry off. It would really be a circle still. And I just click apply here. So pretty straightforward. And it actually has, all of these have an effect on your toolpath. So let me discuss a little bit about a stock model. You have two choices here for stock and stock display only. Okay, I generally go display only unless I actually want GibbsCAM to track the stock and to know what material is left. Same thing with fixture, display only, or fixture. Display only means display only. That's just showing it. So if you want to truly collision check, you should be checking fixture. So it actually has effect on the toolpath. So as I was saying here, I've got a contour op. Let me bring the finished part model back out. And I've got use stock material only. So in the toolpath, you'll notice that if I bring this round out, that although my starting marker is out here, my toolpath is actually reading that stock. I've got a 625 entry line on a 1-inch cutter, so a little bit more than half the end mill, and then coming off 100 thou. So it's making the adjustments as necessary just to cut the stock. What's there? Same thing with this. I'm using 2D geometry to drive the toolpath on this. But if you look here, it actually is looking at where the stock is, making the cut. I've got a 100 thou entry line on it, and making only the cuts as necessary. So when I simulate this, if I single step it, you're not getting excessive toolpath. Now, I've intentionally also drilled the hole into the fixture to show you that as I play this, right here, we've got a gouge, okay? So one of the benefits of calling it fixture rather. So just doing that alone, having it as a fixture, is not going to report that. If you right click on your machine sim rendering and go to settings, even though I have collision check turned on down here, right here, you have to tell it, hey, what do you want it to do when it does collide? So in this case, beep, stock flash, stop the animation, and log to display. And you can control these as well. Let's go on to setting up the body bag. You hit clear this. So you guys are all, if you're working with solids, know what the body bag is. It's just a place to store your models. But a lot of people probably don't utilize the different pages and the different features of the body bag that we have. There's actually two places to access hidden menus. Right here in the blue body bag menu, I have some options here to select the body bag. Okay, actually select a page. We only have one page right now, but I'll show you multiple pages here in a second. We also can view large icons, which I have selected, small icons, details, like here, which will show actually what plane the model is tied to, okay? So on MTM, that's real important, because if you transfer a model from the main spindle to the sub and it was imported into the main, it will show you that, hey, that model is not tied to the sub spindle if you need to do so. So we can also change here. You right click here again and go unbag selected if you pick a particular model and have it highlighted. Let me go back to large icons, sorry. Let's create another page. Let's go insert page. Let's insert another one. Insert page. We can name these what we want. So here I can double click here and say finish part. We can go stock. Rename, go fixtures. And then we can drag parts in between. So if I drag the stock in here, go back here, drag the fixtures in here. Now this is a simple one. We've only got one in each. But like when I'm doing assemblies and such, you know, I can separate these all out. Then if I wanted, I can go select any one of these pages. I just actually finished a machine sim build where it had the intermediate tooling was all part of it, and it was all jumbled into one mess in the body bag. So I could separate out the intermediate tooling, put that in its own page, select it, bring it out. So a very handy feature. Now, one of the other things that you can do, I believe it's under view. I don't have it memorized because these are all things like kind of fluff things to me, but you can set the background color and change the background color of your body bag. So if I wanted it to be green, for example, I can click this, and now the background of my body bag is green. Let's go into another feature here, which is select and deselect. This is one of these tools that I just use occasionally. It's kind of handy. It's like everything with Gibbs. There's 5 ways to do everything. That's what I really like about it. But we can, with face select on, you don't even have to actually select it. You can just have your mouse across and go select down here. A lot of people don't know this is here. If I go select hands and faces, it's a quick way to grab what you want. If I go select faces above, same thing there. I can go and select fillets. So it's going to grab these fillets. So these are all just tools in the toolbox that we're trying to make customers more aware of because they're very handy. They come in handy. They're very part specific as well. So that's really all I have. I'm going to turn this back to Zach.
All right, thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. Anybody have any questions, please throw them into the chat. I don't want to open up the mic because I know what that leads to, everyone talking over each other. So, but if you have any questions off of any of the content that came up, or I guess really at this point, anything else, throw them into the chat and we would be glad to hang around for a few minutes and answer something for you. Beyond that, I'm going to stop the recording. And again, like I said, this is going to be posted up possibly by the end of today onto our YouTube channel. So let's get that recording stopped.